All right, here we go. A lawsuit scheduled to go to trial next month pits a rural California region against the city of Los Angeles, and it's reigniting decades-old tensions. So it focused on something we all need to survive, many take for granted, and that's water. Los Angeles gets half of its water from the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada. For more than a century, people there have battled the city's Department of Water and Power over its methods and its environmental responsibility.
And now, one county claims the agency is breaking state law by withholding vital water deliveries from a valley it has always irrigated. This comes as climate change shrinks the snowpack in these mountains. In our continuing series, Eye on Earth, Jonathan Vigliotti reports on a new round of water wars raging over how we share what's left.
Hundreds of thousands of people visit the Eastern Sierra just to fish alone.
Here on the backside of Yosemite National Park, water is life. For fishing guide Chris Leonard, it's also big business.
We have to have lots of it for quality fishing is what it boils down to.
What is the state of water up here right now?
It's the American West, you know? I mean, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over.
The fight playing out here is the stuff movies are made of.
You steal water from the valley, ruin the grazing.
The 1974 Jack Nicholson classic Chinatown fictionalized a very real early 20th century water war. It started when famed engineer William Mulholland and his Department of Water and Power, or DWP, built a system using gravity to deliver mountain-fed water 300 miles south from this remote region to the growing but water-starved city of Los Angeles.
He bought the land, you know, he imposed as a rancher, and he bought the water rights, and then he channeled all of the water down through the Owens Valley. I mean, that's when the water wars really started.
Many locals claimed DWP stole the water, but to this day, the agency owns almost 500 square miles of land up here, along with the rights to all the water that flows through it. Much of it flows south to LA, but for decades, some of it DWP diverted to irrigate ranch lands here in Long Valley. Like the 1,600 acres leased by cattle rancher Matt Kemp and his wife Maria.
How much of this is dependent on water?
Everything you see. If we don't have water to spread out here, none of this looks like it does now. We can take these if you want.
They're one of 10 ranching families who've worked about 6,000 acres of irrigated land here in Long Valley for generations. They say that until recently, DWP would release billions of gallons of water a year to keep these fields green and the cows fed. Then came a devastating 5-year drought.
And the culmination year, 2015, DWP came to us and said, look, we're going to dry you guys up. It was a shock.
DWP cited the drought as the reason, but 3 years later, when the snowpack in the mountains had rebounded, they told the ranchers again, zero water would flow to them.
My thought was just, how are we going to make it work? How am I going to sustain this? How am I going to support my family?
The chief of DWP's water system, Richard Harisick, points out its leases with the ranchers never guaranteed any water deliveries, but the agency is still committed to providing them.
In 2018, where there was a pretty moderate snowfall, water to be had, and yet none of it for ranchers. What happened that year?
Well, I would say nothing has changed year to year.
Except that year it did change.
Well, there's some things that don't change. Number one is the process by which we determine how much water we deliver. It's really not an equation. It's as much art and science that goes into that. So there's no really one particular thing that drives that.
And that is the origin of the water that we see in the valley.
That's right, yeah.
While water is vital to ranchers, it's also critical to wildlife.
You always want to come to where there's water.
Dora Fogg is a local biologist with her eyes on a particular species.
On the horizon, I actually see some birds.
The bi-state sage grouse is a rare and unusual bird. Its declining population has made it a candidate for the endangered species list. All that water spread over the ranchlands has had a side benefit, an expanded habitat where these birds thrive.
We can't just remove the water without any notice and without a plan to protect the birds.
Wildlife organizations and ranchers aren't usual allies.
I would say that it's been really refreshing, and I think we've realized how much we have in common for the place that we live and love.
LADWP claims it has always set aside water for sage grouse habitat.
They've always gotten water either incidentally just through the application of water for ranching, or when water is really low, will always make a priority for the sage grouse.
We're completely and totally at the mercy of really the snow melts.
And then there's the recreational community, which fears a dried up landscape could drive away tourists, hikers, and anglers.
But it's not just you that relies on that snow melt and the water that comes from it. Los Angeles, how do you compete with that?
How do you compete with DWP?
Yeah.
You don't. They own the land.
Some are trying to compete. In court, Mono County's lawsuit argues DWP must first do a comprehensive environmental impact review before making drastic changes to this ecosystem, like taking away water that's been provided for decades. And as climate change shrinks the snowpack in the mountains up here, fights like these back down here will likely only get worse.
What's your message as you kind of watch this struggle for the water unfold?
Pray for snow.
Pray for snow.
Pray for snow.
For CBS This Morning, Jonathan Vigliotti, Mono County, California.
It's much needed. You need the water, creating these new alliances as they talk about, because this leasing agreement does not guarantee water deliveries.
We take it for granted.
We do. And it's, you know, I find it sort of heartbreaking to hear somebody say, as they did in Jonathan's piece, that they pray for snow to get water. Just let that sink in.
Because you can't fight, as he said,
you can't fight DWP.
Right.
They own
City
the
Hall, right?
land.
So
Right.
there you go.
All right.